and you get towards the last days of the season, and you haven't shot a big buck, 1/200, are you going to accept? Because I've often found the 185, 190. It'll be a nice 8-pointer, but it's not 200 pounds. And so there comes that point where do you settle for that buck if you go out and track him, and not guaranteed you're going to get him, but you do that kind of thing and you weigh it, what you're going to do. Once you get on that big buck, they always tell you to stay on it. And once you do it and the reward is there, that first time you shoot that big buck doing it, that's all it takes.
Welcome back to another episode of Northwoods Whitetails Podcast. I'm your host, Joey Davis. On today's episode, we have a special guest, Dwayne Merrill. He's 81 years old. He's hunted the North Country all his life. He's now hunting it with his boys and his grandkids, and he's got a lot of stories to share. He has been very successful behind the track. I think he told us he'd shot bucks in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, that were all over 200 pounds. I didn't particularly ask him this question, but he told us how many 200s that he had shot, and I'm not going to relay that. It's kind of a personal piece of information that he likes to share, but he's probably one of the most, I can say, of anyone that we know. He's right up there. He's killed a lot of bucks. I'm joined on this episode with Corey Ryder and Brent Dragon. Dwayne was such a good guest that we really didn't have to ask him many questions. He just rolled with the stories, and he was very good with it. There's going to be a little bonus segment on YouTube. Before we got rolling, we talked for about 2 hours, and I recorded his first buck that he ever got. It was a 200-pound, 13-point buck, and that'll be on YouTube. He shot it with a over and under 410. So the bottom was a 410, and the top was a 22. Yeah, good stuff. So you'll have to log on to YouTube and check that out. But here we go. We're going to get right into it, as you guys will hear.
Let's talk about that the big one in there that you were just talking about with the long, big, heavy brow tines.
Yeah, it was. I never got it scored or anything, but it was. It's a nice 9-pointer, and out of the deer I've hunted in Maine, that was one of the ones that was most interesting because my brother and cousins were hunting with me that day, and we were hunting up in a place called Wadley Pond, north of Russell Mountain in the North Maine woods. And I had taken them up. I was driving that day, and I took them up and let them out. They were just going to hunt down through a new woods. We never hunted it, and often you do that. Go to new places all the time, exploring. And if you put 3 or 4 good hunters in there, and they cover enough ground, they're going to come out, hopefully, in Maine with some good areas to hunt or a big buck they found. And this particular day, I took them up north of Wadley Pond, dropped them off on the east side of the road, and I went down south, just drove down south, dubbing around, and figured I'd kill a little time waiting for them to come out. And I drove down, I don't know, a couple miles, and stopped and looked around, and there was a knoll on my right. I was headed south, and I parked my truck and the vehicle. I don't know if we were using a Blazer then or what, but I parked the vehicle, and I got out and I looked at this knoll, and there was a little snow, but it was a frozen crust, ice crystals on the ground, one of those that you can slip on. And I decided to walk up in the knoll, walked up there 300-400 yards, and walked around, decided to walk a little further in the woods, went probably another 300-400 yards on the same little ridge, and looked down, and there was a deer track, and on a fresh deer track on those crystals. And it was, those are hard to tell on crystals, but it was an interesting track because I'm looking at it, and the track was a very small, closed doe track like this, like maybe 100-pound deer, 125-pound deer would make. A closed up track, nothing on the pad, just the front part of the hoof down like that. And why I got curious about it, I'm looking at it. I didn't have anything else to do, where that's how you find things. And lucky, I followed the track just a little bit. And why I got interested is the deer horned a beech shoot, not as big as my little finger, coming out of the ground. A beech shoot maybe 2 feet high, one of those little shoots. This was a little hardwood ridge that you see. And I looked at it and I said, gosh, that's odd that deer would horn that little tree. He'd pushed it around, rubbed a little bark off from it. But the rub was nothing spectacular. The rub looked like maybe a spike horn had played with that tree. So I looked at it and I said, I still am going to follow it along. I didn't have anything else to do, luckily. So I didn't have to be any place. So I followed the track along 300-400 yards, and it went back towards the road where I'd parked the truck. And I followed it along. And we got down near the road, and we're going downhill, and I'm looking at the track, and he broke through the ground. He broke down in the ground some. And I looked at the track, and I go, that's odd. It's odd that this 100-pound deer actually broke the ground down in. But it was still a closed-up track, no real pad, but had gone down in the earth through that frozen granular snow. So I said, just for the heck of it, I'm going to follow that deer. So he went down and he crossed the road, the north-south road. We went on down the lower side, and we kept going down. As we went down, the snow that was there and the ice crystals really melted. There was nothing left. It was one of those days, where it's kind of clear. You got patches of it. So the lower down, I went towards the pond. I don't remember if Wadley Pond was south of me or north, but right in there. And as I went down, the snow and the ice crystals went away. And it disappeared, basically. Not much, any snow really left. So I'm looking at the track. I can still follow him. And we get into some soft earth because we'd gone down low ground. And he broke down in the ground like 8-9 inches, like that. And I'm looking at the track and I'm going, what the heck kind of a deer is this? He broke down 8-9 inches in the ground. And I made up my mind. I started following him. And I said, I'm going to get serious here now. Maybe this thing is something big. And he just clept his foot up. So I went a little further, and he broke through the ground 4 or 5 more times. And I'm looking at the track then, and he began to open up. And I suspected that I probably got close to him. And so I took out some deer scent. And I figured he'd turn to my left, and he did. He turned to my left, and we kept going down. And we went, probably a quarter of a mile at the most. I had the deer scent on, and I made up my mind then, looking at the tracks. He'd opened up, splaying the tracks out, that this was a hell of a good buck. And I better be really ready on him. And we went along, as I said, probably quarter of a mile or so. And I'm following along. I'm ready to shoot. You got the gun right there, your finger's right there, and you're walking where the gun is always ready. And he went into a little ravine like this, a little narrow ravine with a little doorway going in it. The ravine maybe was 75, 60 yards wide inside to my right and left, and maybe 100 yards long. And when I went in the ravine, Of course, I'm ready. And I look up, he's standing at the gate on the other end of the ravine. And he's looking back at me right there. And he's ready to bolt. That scent had fooled him enough. I knew he got curious because he walked around in a circle. Basically when I found those tracks breaking through, he did a little loop to his left. I said, he's curious, but I may have sent him enough, so he thinks it may be a doe behind him making the noise or whatever. And when I pulled up right there, he was standing like that, tail to me, and just ahead looking like that. He instantly bolted. I pulled the gun to the shoulder, and I had it right under the flag. I touched two in him just like that. Boom, boom. And he, boom, like that, flew out of there. And so I just stayed there. I was positive I had the gun on him when I shot. And, he's a big buck. Certainly I could see the antlers then, all of it. And, you could see the size of that body. I call those really big ones when they're, 280, 290 on the hoof are Hereford cattle. I saw one one time that looked like one. And this deer, I walked over, followed his tracks on the bare ground, went down there, and he was dead right there.
No kidding.
And looked at the nice buck, turned around and walked out because I knew I wasn't dragging him out by myself. And by then, my cousin and brother had come down. They'd heard me shoot. They'd come out of the woods, wondered why I hadn't picked him up. And they took the other vehicle and had come down in the woods, and we dragged him out. And it turned out he weighed, it was like 259 3/4, like that. Beautiful buck. Very, very happy to shoot a buck like that. It's just one of those flukes in Maine. He's not the only buck I shot like that. I shot that 10-pointer in Maine. It's on the wall right there. I shot that buck. I was tracking another buck on the south side of the Golden Road on a place called Hurricane Ridge. A lot of people know where it is. It's very close to the border. I was tracking a pretty nice buck, hunting alone in Maine that time. My boys were coming up a couple days later, so I'd gone up early part of the week, Thanksgiving week, tracking a buck along, and I didn't get on the buck till, I don't know, it was maybe noontime, 1 o'clock. Tracked the buck. About 3:30, I'd gone all the way to the east, paralleling the Golden Road, and we kept working up and up and up on the ridge. And I got up there, and all of a sudden I looked down, there's another track cutting across my track and turned and gone up the hill. And I looked at the track, and I said, is it really bigger than the one I'm tracking? They looked a lot alike, And I kept looking at it. And I said, I'm going to follow the other track just for a little bit. Curiosity. So I followed that track a little bit. And not great snow conditions, but good enough to track. And he hadn't gone, I'd gone maybe less than 100 yards. And guess what? He had horned a little bead shoot that big out of the ground. Just like that buck had done. And just hit that little like a spike horn would. No big rub, no tearing the ground up, no big pawing, so nothing like that. And I said, well, I got to follow you. So I switched off the other buck. I followed this one. I didn't follow him. I shot him around 4 o'clock. I'd followed maybe a half hour. And he had turned and gone back to the north. And I'm following along on his track. And I look, and he had turned around in his track and backtracked, probably wondered, heard me or something. And he was standing on his backtrack looking at me. And I pulled up and shot him, killed him right there. And needless to say, I couldn't drag him out that night alone. I was quite a ways up in the woods. So I did manage to, I don't know if this is good for the podcast, but I went down there and gutted him out, and I pulled him up in a tree as far as a limb as I could, but I probably weighed around 200 then. And, you can't pick a deer up by yourself and hang him in a tree. It's hard. But I got him up what I could, and I took off my hunting coat, my Johnson coat, and took off one of my shirts I had underneath. It had sweat on it and everything, and I hung it on the deer. And I took a leak around the ground, so it smelled pretty bad, and I guess mine does. Nothing came that night. And so I made it out of the woods that day. That was Tuesday, and I came out of the woods and hunted with my boys had come up to hunt on Wednesday. They'd snuck out of school, and they'd driven over with Kyle, my nephew, Kyle Scanlon, who used to write for Vermont Outdoors. And he wrote a book on the Benoits, a small book, and hunted with them. And Kyle and Aaron and Ethan. And so we hunted Wednesday morning till about 3 o'clock. And then I said, boys, I've got a job for you. We got to head up on Hurricane and pull this buck out. So it's a lot easier with 3 young guys to pull it out.
For sure.
And so that was the story of how that buck got shot, chasing around in the North Maine woods by myself. And
what did that one weigh?
That one weighed 212. 212. Yeah, 212. Most of the Maine bucks, anybody that's hunted a lot of them, most of the 8-pointers, 10-pointers are going to be 2.5, 2.6 to 225. I'd say an awful lot of the bigger 8s will be right around 225 and 10-pointers. And then once you break into that, in my opinion, in the 230 range up, 235, 240, you're getting in an area where there are not a lot of bucks shot because, we've shot in one of the first years I hunted Maine. It was around 1972 or 73. My cousin Center, Merrill from Londonderry, Kurt Merrill, my brother David, and my ex-brother-in-law, Carl Popolowski, 5 of us hunted together. We were hunting on Millinocket, but that year we went over and we went up and started hunting off the Golden Road. We hunted what is known, everybody will know it, a big mountain called Green Mountain. And I found it turned out to be a 6-point buck. But we went in and scouted on the mountain. I found the tracks, nice big track on the buck. And so I said to the guys, the way we shoot these bucks on bare ground is just keep going back. And we went back a second time with all of us and didn't put him up again. And I didn't know what time he was hanging in there. That was the thing. If you jump him out at 2 o'clock and you start realizing that buck could maybe be back there in 3 or 4 days, I found often on the same time. And the third time we went in, we jumped the buck up and center shot him. And he weighed 266. I mean, only a 6-pointer. That was a nice buck. Wow. And
heavy.
Nathan, I mentioned earlier, shot that 11-pointer with a 25-inch spread, weighed 270. I've shot that one, it weighed 260 or so. Ethan, my son, shot that 8-pointer at the end of that logging road that weighed 277. My brother's biggest buck weighed 238. My cousin Kurt shot that 13-pointer, 240. He shot that beautiful buck with his muzzleloader, was 250 that was in muzzleloading season. We've all shot some big bucks in Maine, and certainly more than one.
Yeah.
That we've shot up there.
Now, have you hunted New Hampshire?
I hunted New Hampshire 1965, 66, 67, and I shot a 10-pointer that went 212. Yeah. It's the only one I shot in New Hampshire that was a buck, and I did not get the buck. I shot the buck, and another guy found him.
No kidding.
Lucky he did, too, and it was good.
Yeah.
The guy, he found the buck, and it was a nice buck, and last day of the season, and it was a good buck. Lucky.
Yeah.
Lucky.
Yeah.
But I killed him dead, but I didn't get him, and I didn't follow him far enough, and that was the thing. And he didn't go that far, but I didn't get him. And then the one in the Adirondacks, the one buck I shot over 200 there, dressed 226, was a heck of a story. I'd been hunting Maine with my cousin Kurt, and his boy Jay, and we decided to go hunt the Adirondacks. We shot some bucks in Maine. I think we shot 5, 6 bucks, whatever. And we decided to go to the Adirondacks. And my brother-in-law grew up hunting in the Adirondacks, so he told me a place to go, and down on the high peaks, but down south. So we drove over. We got there, 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. And we just come from Maine. We're tired, but we had to go up over this mountain on a trail down the backside, and it was on the headwaters of the Hudson River. We were way, way up on the headwaters. And my brother-in-law went in there every year and camped, and he had a camp on the south side of the Hudson River that he crossed with a cable. Him and the forest warden had put a cable up years ago. Steel cable low and one above. Very dangerous if you've carried your backpack and sleeping bag across it. I always took my belt out, hooked it over that, so I didn't fall in that freaking river. It was a good river. But so any day, I said, Kurt, let's go over here. I know about it. It's good hunting, but we're not going to cross the river. We were all tired. We decided we're not doing that. So they came over the backside of this mountain. They walked the trail, and I did. There was a beaver pond that came right up to the trail with a big beaver dam. That was part of that trail. You know how you get those quarter-mile beaver ponds? And the trail ran right through the dam, right on the edge. So I went out past the beaver pond. I went quite a ways. And there was snow on the ground, but just not good snow. And I went out, and I was on the north side of the Hudson River. And I decided to go up this mountain and hunt up on this hill. And I went up on the hill and worked up the hill, and still in the morning, but later in the morning. And I picked up a buck track. I said, it's a pretty good buck track. And followed him 300 yards, maybe 400 yards, just luck. And I looked up, and he was standing probably 150 yards from me, 125 yards. And it was not, he was standing on an angle where I could not shoot the shoulder good. But I knew that, I'm for one that usually takes a shot. There's a deer right there, right in the grass.
Oh, yeah.
See
There
it?
it is. Yep.
Stand up, you can see it.
Yeah, you can see the back of it.
See her standing right there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interrupting the podcast. It's not deer season here, but we're looking at it.
Wonder if she got a fawn right there.
She's got twin fawns, I believe.
Does she?
I've seen them out twice.
When I left my place, there was twin fawns out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she's got twin fawns. They love to lay in that grass. They feel very secure in it. And I never cut it till, I'll probably cut it within a week, but I won't cut the whole thing. I'll cut half of it. Mm-hmm. So they come down every night and lay in that grass. And they watch us in the house. If you walk in there, you're going to see beds all over.
Yeah, they love those warm season grasses.
So anyway, I went up there, and I didn't have a good shot at that buck, but it was good enough he's standing still, and I'm standing still. And I said, I better take this shot. So I pulled up, aimed as far as I could, shot it on the angle, and he bolted out of there. And he tore off to my right. And there was softwood on my right, and I couldn't see him. So I went up there, looked all over. Look at the doe. She's looking at me right now. She sees us in here, probably hears us. Yeah, she's very aware now. So anyway, I looked. I couldn't find the deer. I see his track, and I followed it a little back, and it disappeared. But he bled just a little speck, a little speck, a little speck. And I can tell you from many experiences shooting deer, you want to follow them and follow them, follow everything, because the deer may not always bleed. And you may find them 200 yards. You may find them a quarter of a mile. You never know. Even with these modern guns punching holes in them. But that deer just had specks on the ground, but he turned and went downhill immediately. When a deer turns and goes downhill like that, and I've hit him, I'm pretty sure that deer is hurt. So I stayed on the deer, followed him, and he went downhill, downhill. And as we got closer to the Hudson, it got warmer, and the snow melted. and I was on my hands and knees looking for the blood and sign. And I kept working all the way down. It kept slanting off back to the east, going along. And I really had a hard time tracking him. Nothing to track. I'd go back and I go, he probably went this way. So I'd walk and go that way. And I keep circling it. You got to circle the area. Look for it came out. I'd go back, take the next route I thought, and I kept going. I got down, I was close to the river, and the big thicket here. And I walked around the thicket. It was so thick that you wouldn't go into it. And I walked around the thicket, and I said, no tracks on the other side that I could find. And the trail was right there, the trail that came along the Hudson that I'd come in on. And I looked it all over, and I said, which I've seen before, he's got to be in that thicket. So I went back around my track to the top of the thicket, walked in. He was dead in the thicket. And what happened to him, the bullet hit him right here in the back leg, and it hit that artery. But it didn't let the artery go. He bled all the way down, and it must have hurt him. Been a severe wound. But where he bedded, the whole thing let go.
Huh.
And so the whole area was all blood.
Yeah.
Deader than a hammer.
I've seen it before where it...
Yep. Followed that deer. And if you're not an experienced deer hunter, you've got to be persistent. Everybody knows it. When you track a deer, you got to go back and think like that. And the thing about that deer was I was 2 miles or so in the woods, and I had a big mountain in front of me, and it was like 4:30. And so I dragged him on the trail, got him over to a tree, and I pulled him up in the tree. I worked as hard as I could. I got the rope up over. I got him up. He was standing on the back legs at least, and I got him up over. And I was so dead tired because we'd just come from Maine hunting. We hadn't taken a day off and rested. And when I shot, our signal back then, if I shot a deer and they weren't within whistling or hooting distance, was to shoot 3 shots, 1 minute apart, turn your gun, and shoot into a tree, but with the muzzle up. So the bullet didn't go anywhere, but your sound carried as far as possible. We weren't using any GPSs, walkie-talkies, none of that stuff. And nobody came. I shot my 3 shots, and my cousin Kurt didn't come, and Jay, his boy, is a big husky boy. He didn't come either. So I said, all right. I walked out, back over, cross this brook, cross the beaver dam, and up the mountain, down the other side to the highway. And I got there and said, you guys didn't come when I shot. Well, it was pretty late. We're tired. Excuses. And I could tell they were going, I said, well, I shot a good buck in there. He doesn't have great horns. He's 9 points, but he's over 200. And I said, I've read about these stories over here, and my brother-in-law has told me. Now, where he shoots his deer, down on the south side of the Hudson, they skin them all out. They quarter them up. They put them on a backpack, and they take just the meat out. And you can do that in New York. You've got 7 days to report it. You can actually call the reporting into the thing, or you can mail it in. So I said, we're going to have a job with this one. So I said, what we got to do? I said, I know there's some people over here that pack deer out on horseback. And I said, one thing I could use a beer right now, Kurt. And he said, he could use one too. So, and if you know New York State, we got on Route 9, I believe it is, and we headed north. And in New York State, there's a lot of people in these small towns that have in their living room a sign that says Budweiser or Schlitz or whatever, right in the living room. And they have a bar in the living room. So the first place we came to had one of the signs in the living room. I said, pull it in here. So we go in, we sit down. We haven't eaten all day. And I said, the lady came over and we ordered our beer, and we each ordered a hamburger. And I said, God, we got some food, got something to eat. And there was a couple guys sitting on the other side of the bar, like from here to there. And we're talking. And I said, you guys don't know anybody that's got a horse that could pull out a deer for us? And they said, where have you got it? I told them the mountain. I shot it on the backside. Oh, I said, we know that place well. Our boss takes hunters in there. He's got a horse. And he's home right now, but he might do it for you. He said, we work on his crew. I said, what do you guys do? We said, oh, we cut right away. We cut, power line right aways. But he lives just down the road. I said, you'd mind if we went down there? He said, hell no. Go down and see him and talk to him. And he's got the horse and he takes hunters in. So now, by the time we get up there, it was, 8:30, 9 o'clock. And then we get a hold of him. We go down to his house. It's probably 9 o'clock at night, 9:30, whatever. It's getting late and we're tired. So we knock on the door. He comes to the door. Nice guy. We talked to him. We said, shot a deer way up there, back in. And I said, we're wondering if you would rent your horse and go up and pull it out for us. I said, we're some tired and we can hardly do another step today. And he said, you're going to have to wait. He said, my wife's gone grocery shopping. She should be back in an hour or so. And then he said, we could go and get the deer. I said, what do you mean, go and get the deer? He said, well, I got my crew working tomorrow. We got to go tonight. And I said, tonight? He said, yep. He said, I can do it tonight. He said, I'll meet you up there at that landing at 11 o'clock. And I looked at Kurt, and his boy Jay said, I ain't going up there. I'm going to get a motel room. So we went, got a motel room, and Kurt and I went up there at 11 o'clock, and he comes up, and he's got a big old workhorse. And we're looking at the workhorse, and we're going, oh. So he gets on a horse, unloaded and everything, pulls it out, and comes up, and I said to him, he said, I got a Coleman lantern. He said, we're going to need that. And I said, good. I said, we don't have one with us. We got our flashlights, and that's it. And he said, well, I got the Coleman lantern. He said, one of you is going to walk in front of the horse with a Coleman lantern. I said, any possibility that we could ride the horse in? Because it is a big workhorse, and we're paying for it. And because I hadn't told you that part. I charged $100. and in our condition, we were willing to pay the $100.
Best $100 you ever spent.
Yeah. So he said, no. He says, I haven't worked the horse since August when we hayed. So he said, I don't want to put a lot of stress on the horse right now. And I'm going, that's like a 1,500-pound animal. How stressful are two tired out hunters on that horse? I said, no, don't want to do that. He said, we got to go up over that mountain, down that terrain. It's kind of slippery. He said, guys might fall off or something. So he said, get one eye in the front with a lantern. And he said, I'm going to get in the back with the reins. Had long reins. He was on the back of the horse. And he said, I got to put a blanket over the horse's head. I'm a little worried when we get near the deer that he's going to smell blood and he might act up. I said, okay, all right. So we head out. Kurt's got the lantern. I got the blanket. Keep trying to keep it on the horse's head. Of course, we're only like 2 miles from the deer. And we go along. We get up over the mountain, down the backside. We go along and we come to the beaver pond. And the trail, as I told you, went right on the edge of the beaver pond. The beaver pond, you know how they put all their stuff like this and the water's on the other side. And they do a great job at building a dam. Well, the trail had gone right through there. And, of course, they had built the dam right there. So we're walking the horse through there. Guess what? The horse falls down through the dam on a spot, and he's down on his front shoulder, broken through the dam. Right there. He's got 3 legs. He's down like that. And we're looking at everybody, and we're going, oh, my God. We've got this horse.
Stuck.
we hope he hasn't broke his leg, and we don't have a gun.
Oh boy.
We're looking at this situation not in favorable terms. And I'm looking at him. We go over and we go, we could try to lift him. So we all get around him. And this guy's a pretty rugged guy. And Kurt and I get on him. And we're trying to get him up out of there. And we fool around. And finally, lo and behold, he pulls his leg up. He gets up out of there. His other legs are good. And he steps forward, and he's okay. And we'd wasted like an hour. It's like 1:30 in the morning now. And we go, oh, my God. So we walk along. Here comes a bunny rabbit. And you can't see it through that bench, but it's coming right head on to me. It's going to eat some nice clover. Anyway, the deer's hung in the tree. We get to the deer. We got that deer's the blanket wrapped around the horse's head. He's not bad. We get the deer and we put it right over the horse. And the only thing the horse has on it for gear is the horse's collar and the reins going back. No pack saddle, no other harness, just the reins, a halter, and how work horse's collar is. It's made for pulling on that. But so we tie the deer to the collar. We got the horns hanging down, the ass over here, and we got those little rings on the collar, and we tie it to it. And we turn, get him going, and the only problem is all the way back out, the horse, the way he walked, the deer would slide either off one way or the other way. So we walked all the way back out. I'm with my shoulder on him on one side, sliding him back up. Kurt's on the other side, sliding the deer back up. And we got the lantern, trying to hold the lantern, one of us out here. And we got out of the woods, I don't know, it was 2:30 in the morning, some god-awful time. And that was the story of my first 200-pound buck in New York that almost killed us. I got him out. We went to bed that night. And the next morning we got up, went and got some breakfast. And I said to Kurt and Jay, I said, you guys got your tags. We don't need to go home for a few hours because we just came over to scout. I said, let's go down to this lake. I think this place looks good to me on a map. So we go down there, and I send them down the lake and said, do a swing up around. I said, I'm not going to go that far today, boys. I'm just going to walk around in the woods. I walk up on this ridge, maybe a half mile. I walk up. New York State, if you ever hunt the Adirondacks, you've got to know your oaks, red oaks and white oaks. And the deer like certain kinds. And I was up there sitting on a ridge with a lot of oaks around me. And I'm just sitting there on the ground looking down the ridge. And I look down under this oak tree and I go, Jesus, that's a big buck standing there. Sure enough, it's a nice 8-pointer in the Adirondacks, probably 190-pound buck, pretty good buck, and stand there looking at him. And I go, well, I don't have a tag. I can't shoot the deer. So I just watched him. A few minutes goes by. He looks at me, and then he finally bolts, comes out around the tree, and another 8-pointer, just like him, comes out, and they both run off.
Right there, right together.
It was one of those things. If I'd shot those deer and told those boys they got to drag them out, they'd have shot me. Oh, my God. That was my first day hunting over there.
So how did you get into the whole tracking thing?
Well, the tracking thing, I'd grown up in Londonderry, hunting down there, and hunted up here some, but mostly around Mount Tabor on the big timberland, Moses Pond, Weston Mountain, Cobble Mountain, North Windham, Mount Holly, all that area. And there are some big bucks down there. If you look at the Vermont trophy book, you'll still see some nice bucks coming out of southern Vermont. That big strip of land south of Rutland, all the way to Manchester, Wallingford, is like 15 miles wide. And there's no road in that. Down at Landgrove, there's one road that goes over. So I gradually, like any young hunter, would get in the woods in Vermont deer season and you'd get on a good-looking track and try to track it. The only thing is you didn't know enough to go tracking far enough, and you were hunting with your dad and brother and cousins, and you all planned to be out at a certain time. So that's all of that freedom that I was talking about, how the freedom to hunt, the freedom to have a wife that lets you go hunting, and having that 1 week in November, the first week, or the fourth week, or all 4 weeks. And it's one of the reasons I kind of groomed my life around auctioneering. I was a high school teacher for 6 years and a coach, played sports and all that. But the auctioneering profession, I love it. It's interesting. But it also afforded me the opportunity in November to take time off and to live the life I kind of wanted to live. And it's a very healthy life for your kids. And so I got into tracking. Everybody saw the big bucks and Benoit shot consistently. Larry Benoit changed North American hunting. And at the time his book came out, you know, How to Bag the Biggest Buck of Your Life. You have to read the book. I know people who've hunted with Larry. Obviously the real deal. Lanny, probably the best hunter tracker in North America for a long period of time, along with his brothers, and probably the best shot. And I can't emphasize the ability to shoot enough. But you got to track. People don't believe it, but physically, once you get into it, you got to study the tracks. You got to be able to tell. One of the real problems in Maine, there's a lot of 185, 190-pound bucks running around. And you get towards the last 2 days of the season, and you haven't shot a big buck, 1/200. Are you going to accept? Because I've often found the 185, 190. It'll be a nice 8-pointer, but it's not 200 pounds. And so there comes that point where do you settle for that buck if you go out and track him, and not guaranteed you're going to get him, but you do that kind of thing and you weigh it, you know, what you're going to do. Once you get on that big buck, I mean, they always tell you to stay on it. And once you do it and the reward is there, that first time you shoot that big buck doing it, that's all it takes. From then on, you're a tracker. It's not the only way I hunt, because I love hunting dry ground. I love hunting wet ground, rain hunting. You can shoot deer any day you go out. And luck still is a big part of this game, especially when you go to a new area and do it. But the tracking, the thing to go back to, a lot of people don't believe you can physically run down a buck. I had a nice 8-point buck I shot one day. It was the last day of the season. We're going to hunt in Maine. And we'd gone out. There was a fresh snow. My cousin Kurt and I driving the Blazer. And we came down a road near the Golden Road on the south side. Came down a road, and a buck, this nice 8-pointer, crossed the logging road right in front of us. And I said, I'll take the bucket. And you want, Kurt? And we found another buck that had gone on the other side. So I said, this buck is up at 6:30 in the morning. And one of the telltale signs about that is he probably's been with a doe all night, you know. Usually if they go to bed earlier and get some sleep. But this buck, I got out and I got on him. And I was hunting right near the Penobscot River. And got on the buck. Nice, beautiful, fresh snow. Easy tracking. Could just glance down once in a while. And the first time I jumped him up, I looked at him. And I was, you know, he jumped up maybe 150 yards from me. And I looked at him and I said, you know, I'm going to see this buck again. So I didn't shoot him. I just followed him along again. I jumped him 7 times because I believed that buck had been out chasing the ladies all night. And I was pretty sure that I'd get close to him. Looked at him all over good. And I finally knew my time was running out. And I shot the buck the 7th time I jumped him. He was a nice 8-pointer. He went right around 190 or 2, somewhere right in there. And but my cousin Kurt came down. He didn't get the other one. and we pulled him out, easy pull on snow. Where we ended up was about 200 yards from the road that we drove down on in the morning. So it was an easy drag, but it's one of those bucks that you get on him and you knew he was tired. I shot a buck in New York State like that. I shot several bucks that were so tired. Think about it this way. If you're a big old 300-pound man and you're out in Maine, how many, not to belittle them, but how many 300-pound men are going to track a buck up to 10 miles in a day? Takes one tough dude. I've gotten on bucks that'll take you 10 miles in a day. There's a time in Maine towards the latter part of the season, you get an old buck and he's going to go to the deer yard. He'll take off. You want to find those deer yards because he'll go in a straight line to the deer yard. Nothing stops him. He's made up his mind that day is the day he's leaving and he's going. And you can track and track and track. And unless you got guys ahead of you cutting them off, if you want to, use your GPSs today and the radios, you can cut a deer off. They know where you are. They can get ahead of the buck. Usually what we do, if I'm tracking a buck, like that 200 I shot with Ethan, when he shot that 277, that deer was near the end of the time. We could be in Maine. I got on that buck in the morning, right near the trailer, and I got on him, and I was literally a couple hours behind him, fresh snow, good track, and Ethan took the truck, and when I'd put the buck across the logging road, Ethan would circle, he'd find where I come out. I might leave a piece of tape, but I usually don't. I just brush some snow off and show that I'd walked across there. I put a note in the snow, but he would put a note ahead of me and say, he said, you're a half hour behind the buck that day. So I picked up the pace on that buck and kept tracking him. I crossed another road and he said, you're 15 minutes behind him. Put it in the snow. Because he's driving around ahead of me knowing where that buck is. And he's looking at me on the GPS. And so I picked it up some more. And on that buck, I'm just walking along as fast as I can, pace-wise. I've got the gun ready because I know at some point, I accidentally, I'm going to come on him. We all know those bucks likes to go chew their cud and lie down. But when they're in the rut, they may only lay down for 5 minutes and get up again and go again. You don't know for sure. Or they may bed, This one I just kept trucking on him. And I'm just ready to shoot. About 10:30 in the morning, I come on him. He flies out of the bed, goes to my right, cuts to the left, comes back to the left, and boom, boom. I think I fired at him 2 times, dropped him in a heap. He was dead right there. That was it. But I speed chased him for a while. I knew I was fresh, and I've done that. My cousin's center, the biggest buck he ever shot in Maine, was an 11-pointer, and they dressed around 230, somewhere right in there, 228, 230. Beautiful, beautiful buck. And that buck, we'd been up scouting north of the Golden Road. We're camping, and I had ended up, it was snowing. I'd shot a nice buck, and we were camping in the trailer. Center was there, my cousin Kurt, and Carl Popolowski were hunting with me. And that day before, I'd hunted around in the woods, and I'd come out near the camper, and I'd found a beautiful buck. I backtracked him. He had horned a tree like this down in the woods, and I backtracked him out, went up to the trailer, and I didn't say anything. I just knew he was there. Came back to the trailer, and that morning, Kurt and Carl had to go down to a place called Canada Falls. It's people know where it is, and they went down there because there was fresh logging down there, and I'd seen a hell of a buck down there, one of the biggest bucks I'd ever seen in Maine. Didn't get a good shot at it, and anyway, so they left me with center, and We call him the Duck. He's not that tall, but he hunts, and he's shot a few good deer. And so I said, Senator, I said, I know there's a great buck this morning. I said, I may be able to go put him up. I said, I want to take you. Let's take the Blazer. He had a Blazer, and we drove up the Golden Road. Then we went north. We went up this road. I said, yesterday when I came through here, he crossed this road right on this deer run right here. And I said, let's drive around. I said, I came down with him, and he crossed 3 roads here. And so I said, take me over. Let's go up that road, see if I find his track. I went up the road, found his track. I said, okay, go over and get on that deer run on the first road. And I said, park the Blazer, get right by that tree. He's going to come right by it. Get up the bank so you're looking down and shoot him. So I go down in there, and the buck is between the 2 roads. He'd horned another tree like this, pawed all over the place. I mean, you're going, fresh snow, I'm in heaven. This is great. And so I get on the deer, and I come out. I push him right out by the tree. I look up, no center, no Blazer. He got up and left the spot. Left it.
Oh, no.
So I stay on the track. I take him up across the next road, and I knew Center was running the roads, trying to cut me off, get in front of the deer. But if he just stayed there, they shot him easy. The deer goes up the next road. He goes up to what is called the high road, comes up to that road, and we'd had a camper on that road, and he stopped, didn't go across the road, turned around, came back down, and he crosses that 3rd road. The high road was the 4th road up. Crossed the 3rd road, took out my handkerchief, write a note in the snow to Center, get your ass back down to that road and don't leave that spot. I believe he'll come right back by that tree. So I'm on the deer. I bring him down, and I'm trotting at that point because he's coming down the hill. I'm trotting on him. I'm going, I hope he goes down there. I hope he does. So I come down. I cross that 3rd road where I put the note, come down to the 2nd road. I cross that road. I come to the 3rd road. I'm coming down the hill like this, looking at this logging road coming in. This is all open. And the gate off the Golden Road's like right there, about 300 yards. And the buck is standing on the other side of the logging road, looking back up at me. And, you know, he's got a rack like this on him. And he dressed, I don't know, 228, 230. I think he's in the main book. I don't know if Center ever bothered, because not all the time you do that. But I'm looking at him. I see Center come up with a Blazer. The deer is still standing. Center gets out of the Blazer, goes towards the deer, and he has buck fever. And I know a couple people like that. And he's got his 30-06 running the action. I'm watching bullets fly out, but there's no boom. Action goes, no boom. Action goes, no boom. Action goes, new boom. And I'm going, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. This is one of the best bucks you're going to see. Finally, on the last shot, I don't know what made that buck hold. But I've got the gun up. I'm looking at him in my scope. I'm going, what a gimme. What a gimme. He's standing looking right at it. He finally shoots on the last shot, and the deer drops. We get the deer. I think I ran down, and we got him. They jumped around a little bit, and Center finished him off. But we got him. The shot killed him. And I'm going, this is insane, insane.
That's a pretty good story.
It is. It's a hell of a story.
Yeah,
it was a hell of a hunt.
So,
and great buck.
So you got your boys into hunting.
Yep.
At what point in time did they start getting into the big woods? And
Well, it basically started them around 10 years old. All of them I took hunting with me. All of my boys have been with me when I shot a buck. I wanted them to come along, see what happened when I pulled up, teach them about being quiet in the woods. But I also wanted to see them what happened. My oldest boy, Todd, doesn't hunt. And he goes to deer camp, has a very successful heart business in New York City. He loved to come to camp with my father. He shot at muzzleloading shoots. He was a championship shooter and all. But he honestly did not like killing a deer. And I never push anybody like that. If they, that's something you got to agree to inside yourself. They've all been raised on venison. I was raised on venison. Todd is a hell of a cook. Whenever I've shot a bear, a lot of people don't realize, but bear meat is great. If you've ever read anything about Daniel Boone or any of the trappers in Alaska, in Maine, bear meat and the bear fat, the white fat, is as good as there is. I take the hams and smoke the hams and use them for a Christmas party.
Nice.
Make a mustard sauce up with them. They're fabulous. Bears, I've had some great bear stories.
Yep.
Knock your socks off. But, that year I shot that 17-pointer, I shot a bear too, a great story. But, that year there with Center was a year that was special. We shot that great buck, and talking about staying on it, being persistent, and having the ability to shoot is very important. Now, those deer were taken, walking along. Most people are going to tell you when you find a buck down, especially in the Adirondacks, I've usually find them bedded, and they are chewing their cud. And after if that buck runs off, he's been with a doe, and he runs off and beds down, you're going to follow him along. Usually goes up the side of a mountain, and you're going to want to go very slow, hunt with your eyes. You just scan, all of that. Larry, but to get back to Larry Benoit, he changed hunting. Lanny did. All of those stories did. And we all went out and experienced it, and many people have become successful. They're not every place in North America suited for tracking deer. A lot of places, we all know the Vermont hunters went to Maine, they went to New Hampshire, the Northeast Kingdom, and the hunters from Vermont, by and large, are some of the best hunters in North America in terms of actually hunting deer. It's a whole different thing when you put a good food plot out there in Illinois or Ohio and hunt deer that way. You got a great chance of shooting a great Boone and Crockett. Nothing wrong with it. You eat the venison tastes just as good. You're going to have a story. You're going to put a lot of work into it. But I'm a woodsman, and I like walking in the woods. I teach my kids all the time. Do you know what that eastern ash is, what it looks like? What does that oak look like, that beech look like, that black cherry? It's all about hunting the rivers, the moon, the sun, all of it, and sitting in the woods and enjoying the woods. That's the part that tracking is. Tracking to me is like reading a great novel. It's unfolding in front of you all morning long. And it's just that experience. This deer hunt that I've just related to you could be a novel because it's unfolding and all of the little nuances you could record and talk about them, because a lot of things that happen on that hunt, I don't have to think about it always unless I sat down and think about it, maybe put it on paper, all the little things that go on, how that deer walked, because every deer has a personality and they're going to do certain things and you get used to it. I mean, deer love to walk and get behind a blowdown and look back at you, and you can fool them with scent, and they're a curious animal, and if they're in love, that's another whole ball game. You can hunt the doe, and shoot the buck, and you got to be patient. You find a great doe in heat, and the buck has been around her, he's not going to go far away. He's going to be back there in a little while. He's going to be back all the time, especially if it's a doe with those nice big black eyelashes. You know how pretty they look. It's a pretty doe.
Big tail.
Big tail, yeah.
You'd mentioned earlier when we were inside sitting there going through your photos and whatnot that you don't believe that you don't start becoming a good woodsman and a good hunter until you reach a certain age. Do you want to touch on that?
Well, I just think the maturity of the hunt, the experience, it takes time to to have enough days in the woods, enough hours in the woods, enough places to hunt. How many hunters in Vermont have gone out for most of their hunting life and hunted the exact same woods? How many guys do that and don't get out and experience? A couple years back, I guided David Mammoth. He's a famous playwright in New York. And a couple of people who were involved with Vermont Outdoors had me take him out. He wanted to shoot a deer with a muzzle loader. He had a home in Plainfield, Vermont. And very cool guy, world famous writer. Kind of fun to go with him on the hunt, take him with a muzzle loader. And I took him out into a woods up in the Northeast Kingdom. He'd hunted around Plainfield, that area over there, doing those short little hunts. I mean, go over to Groton, Peacham, get some big woods, up to Caledonia, get some big woods. But I took him up in the Northeast Kingdom and took him on a hunt, got him on a good buck, tracked it for 3 or 4 hours, and I didn't hunt with him. I stayed behind him. I said, if you want to get the experience, you need to hunt this deer. I'll guarantee he's a buck, absolutely a good buck. And I said, I'll go behind you 300 yards, 400 yards. So any situation comes up, you just give me a whistle or a hoot. I'll be there in minutes. And we ended up getting cut off on a road. A guy come along, the buck crossed a logging road, and the guy took the track and threw his cigarette butt on the ground and took the track. I said, maybe we could outrun this guy. But, all of that in tracking is age and your number of experiences in the woods. Me talking today, and if hunters really listen to experienced hunters, that can put you years ahead. Yeah. And if you're able to relate that and go out and do it. But I strongly advise, if you can find a good tracker and he's willing to take you out, just if it's one time.
Yeah, I think you can learn a lot from somebody that's experienced a lot more than you have.
My nephew Nathan is a great tracker. He's taken 3 or 4 young guys out and totally turned them around, Yep. Take them over to the Adirondacks. We have a big woods right here in central Vermont, not too far east of us, that you could find the Benoits on, and a lot of good hunters.
Yep.
That strip of woods. And good place to take somebody. They're kind of mixed in those roads. Might not come out for a couple days, but they will come out hopefully.
Yep.
If you spend a night in the woods, as I said, your teeth are chatter, and the only side that's going to be warm is the side with the fire.
One more thing. You had mentioned that you think that everybody should shoot a deer. Every man should shoot a deer.
I think it's important for. There's been a number of studies on this about people. There's a whole thing that about the first time somebody hunts and they get going on it. They eventually want to see something dead on the ground, and then they shoot the first deer. But it has a lot to do with men. The primeval feeling of man furnishing food to the family and bringing this catch in. Anybody who shoots an animal, my first rule is I never shoot anything unless I'm going to eat it. Nothing. Go to the gravel pit, shoot targets, shoot clay pigeons, shoot your .22, but do not kill anything for the fun of it. The only thing you shoot are things you're going to eat. And that's a very good rule to hold everybody to. And so it's just as important when you shoot that first buck to get over there. My kids all watch me dress deer, 10 or 12 deer, cut them up, all of it. And my cousins, we'd get together. We might butcher 10 or 12 deer in a day, cutting all our deer up, doing it together, wrapping it all, putting it in the freezer. That's a great experience, great time. A good way to end the season. And all your kids see how it's done. You want a wood stove going, you want a skillet, and you want to cook some venison. And you want to sit around and tell hunting stories and let them circle with the men. Let them come around and realize that this is part of our life. That man hunted, man killed things, and we ate it. It's part of our life. And there's a certain satisfaction, a mental thing about doing it, that you've accomplished that. When I would go ice fishing years ago, and I'd catch 2 or 3 brand sacks full of big yellow bellies when the Broad Lake froze every year. I'm old enough when the Broad Lake froze every year. When there were 50 shanties at the breakwater in Burlington, the south end, and we'd drive our shanty out with our wooden station wagon. And so we caught pails of smell, or you caught 3 or 4 brand sacks of perch, and you went home and dressed them all night long. But you had enough perch for the year, enough smell, froze it all, enough venison. I hung my hind quarters in my garage often all winter, and it was 38, 39 degrees. The best temperature to break down meat, if you go to the best steakhouses in New York, you'll find it's 38, 39 degrees. And even if it gets a little mold on it, scrape it off.
Yeah.
You know, that meat is broken down the bacteria. It is so good to eat a steak like that. But we used to have a Christmas tree business, also in the family. We're Vermonters. I'm 8th generation. And in Vermont, you had to learn to make a living somehow. And I had a great uncle who was, you call him the Christmas tree king of the world at one time, growing trees in Vermont. But we always, when we sold Christmas trees in South Burlington, we had a carport and we always had a wood stove in there. And we always hung some deer. And customers would come and we'd always eat some venison.
Nice.
And that's an experience nobody forgets.
Yeah, yeah.
City people begin to realize that Vermonters are serious about deer meat. It's part of our life. And if you're a Native American and you've been raised on it, you've eaten all of this food, beaver, whatever, black bear, it's part of your diet.
Yep.
And you just look forward to eating that.
Yep.
It's something that people experience. And most people who move up here, have great intentions, but have little knowledge or common sense about how these things work and how really it works if they got out and lived at a camp and saw it. And there are different types of camps. There's camps I'd never bring my kids to.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I have good friends that go to camp in the Northeast Kingdom and they're not allowed to bring a gun. You bring your playing cards and all the food you can eat, and you have a week of fun playing cards, and that's their relaxation. The business is forgotten. Business people, and they just are there. They're safe in camp. They can't get in too much trouble.
No guns.
You guys got
and what is
else?
it? What happens in camp stays in camp.
That's right.
There you go. There you go. Well,
I have one question. All these, 200-pound deer that you've killed, and you have
Many that weren't.
Right, that you have in the rafters here, the antlers, but only 3 mounted. You know, you don't see that. I mean, in
there are guys that hunt about. You know, there's definitely a controversy about whether you're a trophy hunter or not. And I think Larry Benoit put it in a very good way. All us Vermonters on the farm, as we did, we're going to eat that meat. And if it's a legal spike horn, we're going to shoot it and we're going to eat it. But Larry said, which I thought was a great line, why shoot a 125-pound buck if you could shoot a 225-pound buck and have twice as much meat? I totally agree with it. One of the things that I learned years ago, when the 1960s, when they started the clear cuts, is one of the greatest things that happened for hunting. All the conservationists go, oh my God, we're getting rid of the carbon. But that carbon you cut down on that house, it's still in the house. It didn't go anywhere. And you gotta look at what the clear cutting did. The state of Maine, they stopped hunting moose in 1938. And the moose came back slow. My wife's uncle was in Oxbow, Maine in 1940, Rudy Mahalka, and he lived at the end of the road. And he told me a great moose story, but I'm not going to repeat it because even though it was 1940, still could get him in trouble. But the moose came back when the clear cuts came. A big bull's it's just like my friend Donnie Richards over here, the farmer. He's got 325 head of cattle. And he puts it to me this way, Dwayne, you got 3 boys. And when they're growing up, they eat a lot, don't they? How would you like every night for supper to feed 325 head of Holstein that weigh 1,600 pounds, and they're each going to eat 50 pounds of corn a night? And that's the way it is with the moose in Maine. When they did the clear cuts, the growth came. And the first 3 years, the deer will feed on it, heavy. And the fourth, fifth year, that gets up higher. And then, you can run into tag alders, depending if it's a softwood cut that comes back hardwood cut comes back softwood. But that created the greatest deer hunting in Maine, and it raised the weight of these deer. A spike horn in Maine can weigh 150 pounds. I've seen it. An 8-pointer, 3 years old, he can be 202 pounds, 210 maybe. If you shoot a deer 6 years old, he's going to be one giant buck, So the clear cutting has helped the hunting a lot, brought the herds back. The big killer is cutting the deer yards and bad snow years. Yep. Bad snow years in Vermont, Maine, do more damage to the herd. They can't get around and feed. Every day I watch deer here, and a lot of people don't realize that deer eat 50% of the time in the summer leaves. They come up. That's where your browse line is. They're eating those leaves all the time. I've seen years that I was hunting deer, the deer didn't have a lot of feed, and they were licking maple seeds off the ground. Think about what they eat. Get a dry year. I can show you in a dry year in the Adirondacks, I can drive you around in an evening and show you 50 deer out. It's because of the feed. Yep. You get a year when you got a lot of acorns all over those mountains. Remember, that's a big block of woods. And so the acorns, they're everywhere. Then it's really hard on. They're everywhere. And the feed has so much to do with it, about having those deer there. Years ago, and you got to keep in mind, in Vermont, 1950, you only cut the trees. You only cut a tree, and you cut 2 logs out of it, and you left the top in the woods. So what did we do? We hunted those tops. What do they do now? They chip the whole thing. Mm-hmm. That was a bad thing for us, because they left those tops. They go to the cuts immediately. Yeah, sure do. You had 1950. You could buy a cut over acre of land for $15, $20, and if it had good timber on it, it was worth $30 or $40. A lot of farms sold for $1,200, $1,500.
Times have changed now.
Yep.
That's
I think we've done enough.
Yes, it's a very good podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you.